Call to order this regular meeting of the Finance, Organization, and Personnel Committee. This meeting is being broadcast live on the City of Keene YouTube channel and on channel 1302. The video is also streamed on the city's website and is posted on the website by the end of the next business day, barring any technical difficulties. Copies of the printed agenda are available in the wall pockets as you enter the meeting room. Public and other city councilors will be recognized to ask questions and make comments on the agenda item under discussion. After being recognized, all remarks are to be made through the chair. I will not recognize an individual a second time until everyone who wishes has had a chance to speak. Anyone who wishes to address the committee is asked to go to one of the microphones in the room and identify themselves by name and address prior to speaking. And written comments on any agenda item from the public will be accepted at the city clerk's office until Tuesday at 1 p.m. Our minute taker is participating remotely. Committee members, please be sure to turn on your microphones when speaking. And if the minute taker is unable to hear us, they will let us know. Having said that, we have a 6-item agenda, and the first being from our counselor. Would you like to speak again about your letter to the city council, which we put on more time while we do a little research?
All right, sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jacob Favelis, Main Street, and also City Councilor. I wrote this a couple months ago now, I think, or at least several weeks ago, a letter to the council asking for a ballot question on the prohibition of Keno operation in Keene to be referred for the upcoming municipal election. I know that the clerk and city attorney have some staff comments to add to this as well. I will just update the committee that the governor has since signed the legislation that was being referenced, and so I think that we're ready to move forward on placing this on the ballot if that's the will of the committee and the will of the council.
Thank you. City clerk has detailed information.
Good evening, Terry Hood, City Clerk. Before we start talking about the timeline, I was just going to give a little bit of background on when these questions came before the council in the past. We have dealt with this in 2017 and in 2019. At both of those elections, the voters voted to not go forward with Keno in Keene. In 2017, it was brought forward by the Lottery Commission, and then they brought it forward again in 2019. This time it's coming forward through a counselor because a law change has gone into effect that essentially flips the script on what the question is really asking voters. And it's also making inaction sort of an action. So if we don't do something, if we don't ask the question of voters in 2027, this would by default become effective, and Keno would then be permitted until we take an action. I did talk to the Lottery Commission, and they explained to me that if we don't do this in 2025 and we wait until 2027, that licenses would start being issued as soon as the law goes into effect. And even if we take an action in 2027, those licenses would be allowed to go into their endpoint, which is essentially a year from the date of issuance. So I think that's important information for us to have. So the bill has changed the wording of the question to shall we prohibit the operation of Keno games within the town or city. Previously, it was phrased as shall we allow the question. So it's not only reframing, but the wording sort of creates a default framework for this will happen if you do nothing. So sort of reiterating that. So as far as the timeline goes, RSA 28451 sets the timeline for adding the question to the ballot. To comply with that timeline, the council would need to make a decision on whether to add the question or not no later than your first meeting in October, so October 2nd. And a public hearing would need to be scheduled at the same time. The hearing is not for voters to weigh in on whether the question should go forward. The council actually makes that decision, and then the public hearing is an opportunity for voters to be educated about that question and what it means and what the implications are. And so I've reached out to the Lottery Commission because in the past they've been present at our public hearings to explain Keno and how it may impact the city if it were to go into effect. And they have us on their radar so that they'll come on the 16th if we do in fact go forward with this. We also, in the past, have had, there's a nonprofit organization that is sort of there for people who have gambling issues, and they've come to one of our hearings, not the second one. Because this really has changed the framework of how this is working, they may want to come this time. So if the council wants to extend an invitation to them, we certainly could. But in the end, we'll need to have a public hearing on October 16th. We have 7 days to publicly notice that, and voters will be educated on what the question means and what the implications are at that time. We're not allowed to provide sort of educational materials to voters about ballot questions. I know it's a little odd, but we typically refrain from that. Certainly if someone asks, we'll do our best to explain, but we don't give out materials that say, if you answer this way, it means this. If you answer that way, it means that. We don't do that. So, and I think that's all I have for you. We're certainly within the timeframes to do this, and if you want to, we are able to at this point. So, any questions for me?
Comments
Okay.
from the city attorney?
Sure. Terry covered everything important. The thing I wanted to just emphasize a little bit for context is, as Terry explained, or city clerk explained, your vote tonight is a recommendation up to the council to do two things: to put the question on the ballot and to set a hearing. And like the city clerk explained, that hearing doesn't then call for another council action. From this recommendation up to council, puts it on the ballot, then it's basically just a hearing for information, and then you go to the polls. So, kind of an interesting one.
Any questions up here? Members of the public? All right.
I was just gonna say, if we, I just submitted a letter the other day that requires a very similar process, so if, they may be able to carpool from Concord if the Liquor Commission wants to come down, if you set it for the same date.
In a state car. All right. Motion.
Move to recommend that the city council place the question of whether to prohibit Keno on the November 4th ballot and schedule a public hearing for October 16th.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Further discussion, members of the committee? Seeing none. All in favor? No one's opposed? Unanimous. Thank you, Counselor. Keene Police Department.
Good evening. Mike Hopka, police captain here in Keene. I'm here to speak.
Can you turn on your microphone, please?
Thought the red light meant I was on. No. Good evening. Mike Hopka, police captain here in Keene. I'm here to speak about the recurring annual New Hampshire Highway Safety Grant that Keene Police typically participates in. This, again, is an annual grant. It allows our officers to take part in different initiatives over the course of the year, to include special enforcement patrols for speed, drunk driving, distracted driving, downtown pedestrian, bicycles, and things of that nature. And again, this just helps for us to pay our officers to take separate duties to take part in these different statewide initiatives.
Questions? Members of the public?
Move to recommend that the city manager be authorized to do all things necessary to accept and expend the grant from the New Hampshire Highway Safety Agency to fund Highway Safety Grant Keene.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? No one's opposed? Unanimous?
Thank you very much.
You're going to have your younger brother come up?
Lucky enough for a twofer tonight. Good evening, Steve Tenney, Police Captain from the Police Department. This is another grant that you are used to seeing every year. This is for the Substance Abuse Enforcement Program grant. This is one we've participated in for many years. You've known it as Granite Hammer, Granite Shield. I think it's had probably 6 different names. This year, the award is $70,000, which is roughly double what you're used to seeing. And that's because starting this year, it's on a 2-year grant cycle, so you won't have to see me next year. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Questions, committee? Yes, sir.
I think it might be for the city manager. The more I read, I can see there are a lot of cuts in public safety and other type of grants from the federal government. And do you see them having an impact on us?
That's really hard to answer. We haven't seen a direct impact yet for the grants that we typically receive or apply for.
Thank you.
Anything else? Members of the public? Seeing none? Your turn.
Move to recommend the city manager be authorized to do all things necessary to accept and expend the New Hampshire Department of Safety 2026-2027 Substance Abuse Enforcement Program grant in the amount of $70,000.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion by the committee? Seeing none, all in favor? No one's opposed, unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
How are
David
you?
Kling, Airport Director. What we have is a pretty easy one here. Thomas Transportation has been leasing parking spots at the airport for a couple years. That lease has expired. There are no more renewal options, and they'd like to continue. So we're just looking to give the city manager or recommendation for the city manager to be able to negotiate and execute a new lease with them.
Questions up here? Okay. I'm thinking of my question while
Okay. So my question is, we're renewing the lease. Will there be an increase is it based on parking space or?
Fair market value.
Yeah, okay. So what is the amount, like,
Well,
what the old lease was? and what
Previous
is
lease
now?
was $7,200 a year, I think we got. So we'll update it. We'll look at the fair market value now and update it. And the last lease, we did not have an escalation clause in it. We'll put that in this time with a 3% escalation. So it'll bring it up to what our airport leasing policy says.
And in terms of the years that it will cover, are we increasing the number of years?
They have asked for that. But this, again, this will be to negotiate. So we'll be negotiating those terms. So
Thank you.
how many spaces are they working
they
on?
have 40. They don't, they use half of that most of the time. So
Okay. Anything else? Members of the public? Your turn.
Move to recommend that the city manager be authorized to negotiate and execute a lease agreement with Thomas Transportation for parking spots at the King Dallas Hopkins Airport.
Second.
Okay, been moved and seconded. Further discussion, members of the committee? Seeing none, all in favor? Anyone opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chair, may I ask that we take the last item next, since the Public Works Director was here last night? Let him go a little early tonight, if you don't mind.
I certainly don't mind. Good evening, Mr. Chair. Don Lucier, Public Works Director. Tonight, I have the rare pleasure of asking you to allow us to apply for grants rather than asking you for money. The grant that we're looking at tonight is the Monadnock Alliance for Sustainable Transportation. We have applied for this in the past and received it. We used it in the past for doing some of the bike improvements on Main Street. We are going to be, we've discussed it amongst the staff and with Southwest Regional Planning Commission staff, and we are actually going to be applying for 2 separate grant applications in parallel. One will be for the cost of the flashing beacons as part of the downtown project. The other one would be for the cost of the differential cost between concrete sidewalks and bike lanes for the downtown project. And basically, the thought is by submitting 2 different applications, it would give the review committee the opportunity to fit in whatever they can within their program. They've got a pretty limited amount of money, and they want to spread it around to the entire region. So that is the request. In addition, reviewing the application materials, we did realize that a lot of grants require us to submit letters of support from community groups and agencies and whatnot. This one specifically says we have to submit a letter of support from the governing body, so the city council. So you should have at your tables tonight a revised recommended motion, a little different than the one that was included in the agenda packet. Basically, it would also authorize the mayor to write letters supporting the grant application. And with that, I would be happy to take your questions.
Questions up here? Members of the public? Go ahead.
If there are other groups you want support, letter support, I'm happy to help with a reach out. If
Okay,
there's-
great, thank you.
Seeing none? Back to you.
Move that the Finance, Organization, and Personnel Committee recommend that the city manager be authorized to do all things necessary to apply for, accept, and expend grants from the Monadnock Alliance for Sustainable Transportation, and further, that the mayor be authorized to write letters expressing the council's support for the proposed bike lanes and crosswalk safety improvements.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion by members of the committee? Seeing none? I'll-
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks. Have a good evening. So, airport solar project, city manager and our guest.
Dave, do you want to say anything as an introduction before we start?
I was completely unprepared for this, so. Dave Hickling, Airport Director, so. Right, well, sometimes, but, yeah, this project is great. This location on the airport is prime for this kind of development. When we had McFarland Johnson do the land use study a few years ago, it was determined that that really is the only use for this land because of height restrictions. So to have an opportunity to be able to develop this and use this land when we really can't use it for anything else is just a great opportunity. It's going to help the city reach our zero or our clean energy goals. So we're glad that we have that airport property there and an opportunity to develop this. Yep.
So we have been working with Revision Energy, and tonight we have Dan Weeks. He's got a short PowerPoint to go through where we are at with this project. And the size of this project and the timing of this project has made it so that we are actually looking at whether or not we should purchase the solar arrays versus what we typically do, which is a power purchase agreement. And with a power purchase agreement, you're locking in the price for your energy for a number of years, typically 20, and then you have an opportunity to purchase it after 6 years. And the reason for that magic year number, 6, is because investors have been taking advantage of a 30% tax credit through the federal government, and there's a period of time they need to maintain ownership of the array before they can then sell it. we can actually apply for that 30% incentive or that tax credit ourselves. And so by doing that, we would reduce the overall cost of the project and make the project even more financially favorable to us. The hard part will be finding a way to then fit that into our overall capital plan. And so I'm hoping tonight we can hear from Dan and sort of walk through where we're at. And then at the next FOP meeting, get into more of the details of financing. I did provide an overview, a financial analysis of both what Dan and Revision has prepared for us, as well as an independent analysis as well. And honestly, I think we'd probably be somewhere in the middle, because that's typically, we look at best case scenario, worst case scenario, and so we'll be able to talk more about that analysis at your next FOP. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to Dan.
Thank you very much, City Manager, and thank you, Chairman and Committee. Dan Weeks, Vice President.
Can you turn on your microphone, please?
Sorry about that. Here we go. How's this? Thank you very much, Dan Weeks, Vice President and employee owner at Revision Energy. Happy to be one of our 420 employee owners across New Hampshire, as well as Maine and Massachusetts. Also, personally, just very grateful for this opportunity to come before the committee. It's been some years since I was last here. Revision Energy has been very privileged to work with the city on prior solar projects through the RFP process. And we are, needless to say, really excited about the possibilities here for the city to take a very significant step toward its clean energy goals. Also personally gratified as a Monadnock kid, grew up a few towns over, went to Conval High School, live over in the city of Nashua, but my brother's here in town, and so I always appreciate the opportunity to come back. If I may, go through a couple of highlights on this project. Wanted to give a refresh on the project background. Probably most relevant is some ownership considerations, the cost, incentives, projected savings, and I know the city manager has also consulted some independent authorities on those questions. And then very briefly, net metering, community benefits, and community engagement. For the high-level view of this project, as I think you're all aware, we're looking at an area of the airport property south of the runway. As the airport director Hickling just noted, it is subject to building height restrictions, so very limited potential uses of that quite sizable tract of land south of the runways. It is a cleared greenfield, and of course we always look for opportunities to not cut down any trees, but to install on land that doesn't have other uses, landfills, for example. On a brief side note, if I may, we are excited to be installing a much smaller project at the Rose Lane landfill, the former wastewater treatment site, in the near future in partnership with a local leader, Peter Hansel. So this project is also cleared land with limited alternative uses. The system size, after a number of design iterations, won't take you through the entire process unless you're interested, but we have landed at 5.5 megawatts of DC capacity. That's the panel nameplate capacity. That's 3.5 megawatts on the AC inverter side in terms of power that will be directly fed to the grid. It's a fixed tilt community solar farm, a little over 9,000 individual panels. Those are all domestically manufactured here in the US. From a climate standpoint, it would produce close to 6.5 million kilowatt hours of clean electricity per year. It's equivalent to a little over 800 typical New Hampshire homes, and that would offset a little over 3,200 metric tons of carbon emissions per year. It would be one of the largest projects in the state of New Hampshire. High-level community benefits, the energy generation and renewable energy credits exceed $1 million, about $1.1 million per year, according to our analysis, and happy to dive into those assumptions if helpful. And those would be reflected as on-bill credits for the collection of municipal and school utility accounts with Eversource. As we run the assumptions over the warranty period and the commercial lifespan of 40 years, you can see quite substantial long-term savings And again, happy to talk about the assumptions around ongoing maintenance costs as well as utility rate inflation. Upfront, we're looking at an initial cost a little north of $14 million before the tax credit. As the city manager noted, historically, most municipal and other projects for tax-exempt entities have been owned by third-party investors who can take advantage of the tax credit. But a few years ago, with passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, and specifically the direct or elective pay provision, municipalities have had the option to directly access the 30% tax credit, and that is available if the city council is able to move forward quite soon before the sunset period on that tax credit per the H.R. 1 budget bill this summer. So the city would be able to directly access the 30% tax credit, bringing the cost to a little over $10 million net cost. And if the city was to finance with a municipal bond, it would be cash flow positive from year one. For a brief timeline, starting in 2019, as I'm sure you're aware, the City Council passed its 100% clean energy resolution with the goal of 100% clean energy for municipal energy needs by 2030, and then on a community-wide basis by 2050. As an outgrowth of that commitment from City Council, the city undertook its second major solar project. We were also privileged to install through an RFP process in 2016 and 2017 the first large city project over on Marlborough Street at Keene Ice and the Police Department and Public Works Department. But in 2020 and 21, the city underwent another RFP process and, as an outcome, signed a letter of intent with Revision to develop multiple airport solar farm opportunities. There were 3 or 4 different projects that we assessed and designed and presented for city review. The project that made the most sense at that time was the 1.3 megawatt solar farm at the wastewater treatment plant, which was installed in 2022 under a power purchase agreement. To continue that effort in 23, the city proceeded with a letter of intent to continue developing airport solar farms, and at that point honed in on that area that we're now looking at south of the runways. Revision has been glad to undertake the development efforts at our expense and appreciate the city's desire to do a project. And so from our standpoint, the possibility of installing a significant solar farm was good reason to continue investing in their development. Since 2023, we have been working on a number of tracks. First of all, with the utility Eversource, I'm pleased to advise that just today we received the preliminary results of their full system impact study. There is still some more study work ahead. It's been a roughly 2-year process with the utility, but we received estimates for interconnection that were well aligned with our initial estimate. We have sometimes seen those costs come in very high, but we were relieved to see the costs were in line with our expectations, subject to completion of the full study. We've also been working extensively with New Hampshire Fish and Game, with the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services, with the town of Swansea, where we recently received approval through the Zoning Board of Adjustment for the variance required at that site, and are expecting to go to the Swansea Planning Board in the coming few months. We've also recently received approval between New Hampshire Fish and Game and the FAA for settlement of some complexities that arose around a sparrow, a species of bird in that field area, and we substantially redesigned the project to accommodate that bird species, and through consultation with both the FAA and Fish and Game have arrived at a good conclusion where that habitat will be protected. And of course, happy to provide much more detail if the council wishes. And so we are moving into the final design and engineering phases, the final permitting phase with DES, as well as at the Swansea Planning Board. And naturally, the key question, I think, is whether it makes sense for the city to move to direct ownership of this project. I won't go into a lot of detail here unless you'd like to, but as you can see on the right side of the screen, the system is actually 2 separate, or really 3 separate arrays in 2 distinct areas of the southern portion of the airport tract. Initially, we had a more compact and somewhat cost-efficient design in a single area, but after a number of surveys completed in that field area, as I noted, the concerns around this endangered bird species, we have substantially altered the design. It does have a bit of an impact on cost, but fortunately, the economics, especially with rising electric rates, do support from a financial standpoint. We've also included here the system specs and the performance production modeling. Happy to elaborate as well. At a high level, ownership here, as I noted, would entail signing a contract for the engineering, procurement, and construction of the project. Revision would continue to be responsible for obtaining all permits and utility approvals. So the city would be essentially entering into a turnkey contract. As a tax-exempt entity, it would still be eligible for the 30% investment tax credit under Section 48E of the Internal Revenue Code. That would be paid through the direct pay mechanism at the completion of the project, so there would be a lag in receiving those funds. Since passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, I can advise that we've seen a number of New Hampshire cities and towns take advantage of and receive those payments as promised. It's a lot of money to wait for, we certainly understand, but we are glad to now be seeing a couple of years since that law was passed. Here in New Hampshire, a few dozen towns have taken advantage, and across the country, several hundred have utilized the ITC through direct pay. What would be of critical importance to ensure that the city receives that 30% credit is that it is able to move to contract soon and make an initial deposit payment. We had 3 weeks ago the issuance of rules from the U.S. Treasury Department on the beginning of construction safe harbor process. As you may be aware, under H.R. 1, the budget bill that was signed into law last month in July, the tax credit does phase out entirely for residential systems, clean energy systems at the end of this year, but there's a 3-year runway through the end of 2027 for commercial systems, provided that they meet beginning of construction safe harbor. And it was clarified by the Treasury Department that if the system is at least partially procured, minimum 5%, it will be able to reserve the ITC, the tax credit, and proceed with construction over the next couple of years. That's on the federal side. On the state side, we have now for a couple of decades had a New Hampshire net metering program. It has evolved over that time. Critical step was the expansion of net metering to exceed the historic 1 megawatt cap, and projects now up to 5 megawatts AC, this again being 3.5 AC, are eligible provided that they are serving municipal loads, cities, school districts, counties. We have, in addition to our work with the city, worked with Cheshire County and had a lot of conversations with the schools over the years, and been able to obtain both city and school district utility accounts to confirm that there's enough combined demand for electricity, excluding what is already being served at the wastewater treatment plant and on Marlborough Street, that the city and schools together could fully utilize the power and thereby comply with New Hampshire net metering. Those rates are pegged to the Eversource default service. In addition, as the owner, if the city were to move forward with ownership, we would recommend an operations and maintenance agreement. Revision or others can provide that. There's obviously no requirement that you work with Revision. For larger systems, virtually all of them are under O&M, and that provides annual preventive maintenance, weekly or daily inspections, production monitoring, et cetera. The commercial lifespan is estimated to be 30 to 50 years. That's a long time, so guaranteeing systems for that long is, we wouldn't want the city to assume that it will produce at a certain level for 50 years, but 30 years is the panel warranty period. 40 years is considered the minimum commercial lifespan based on a lot of data and research from the National Renewable Energy Labs at the Department of Energy. In brief, their finding has been looking at the earliest generations of solar photovoltaics in this country and in Europe, that systems at 40 years are still producing about 80% of the power they did in year one. They're simple systems with no moving parts, and we do model into the financials a full replacement of the inverters midway through the system life. That's the one component that you certainly will need to replace. At the end of that commercial lifespan, the city could could repower the system, could obviously decommission it and return it to open land, whatever the city determined best at that point. Administration of these assets is fairly simple. An annual insurance policy, naturally, mowing is recommended twice a year. We do recommend developing these as pollinator habitats, as we've done next door at the other airport site at the wastewater treatment plant. So minimal mowing just to avoid the grasses reaching above about 3 feet and starting to shade the panels. And then once a year, annual administration of the net metering agreement, confirming that the city accounts and school accounts utilize all of the power generated. Were that to change at some point, if the city were to pursue other solar projects or the schools, they could always bring in other municipal participants such as Cheshire County. Then to provide the brief financial overview, I already gave some of the highlights. You can see the turnkey cost. I apologize for a slight discrepancy between this and the first slide. As I noted to the city manager this afternoon, we went through a final engineering review. We have seen since July some upward movement in solar panel pricing, which accounts for the slight increase, roughly 2% increase. At the same time, we have also seen some positive movement on the renewable energy credit trading price. We're still carrying a conservative REC assumption. Happy to go into more detail if helpful. And so the net investment figures are substantially the same, about 1% delta from the initial July figures, and the long-term savings are slightly higher. That 25-year period, $25 million, is obviously a very substantial sum. The key considerations there, and this is a little bit too tiny to read, I suspect, but I do want to be transparent about the key assumptions driving that very substantial long-term savings figure. The first is obviously the production level of the solar array. We do assume annual degradation, so a loss of production of 0.33% per year, which is in line with the current solar panel warranty. So if production is more significant than that, the panels are subject to being replaced under a warranty claim. We also include in that the cost of annual operations and maintenance. If the city was to undertake a full O&M contract with Revision or potentially another provider. And as I noted, we assume full replacement of the inverters midway through the system life. The energy rate, we start with an average, running average rate. As you probably know, default service rates do fluctuate quite significantly. We saw a period of extremely high rates, 22 cents a few years ago. We saw them come back down in a correction to a little under 10 cents. Currently, they're about 11.5 cents. We take a running average of the 6-month period for your starting rate, and then apply an escalator based on the U.S. Energy Information Administration, USEIA, of 3.5% per year. Last week, the latest short-term energy outlook from EIA is projecting 4.5% inflation. We would not want to model that assumption. It will vary year by year. That feels a little bit high to me, but 3.5 is conservative compared to what we are seeing currently in the market. So those are the key inputs in this financial model. Of course, we can't predict the future, so the City Council should proceed knowing that there will be some variation, to be sure. But based on those conservative assumptions, the project would generate, as noted, about $25 million in savings over that 25 period and roughly 36 over the 40-year lifespan. And then finally, on the right side here is just a comparison of the levelized cost or the unit cost of energy from solar versus from the utility grid. And you can see under either a purchase or loan scenario, we would presume that Keene, like most other municipalities, would fund this via a municipal bond. The per unit electric rate is between 3.5 and 5 cents per kilowatt hour. Obviously, utility rates today are substantially higher than that. So in sum, that is the main reason why we've seen a number of municipalities, cities and towns around the state, counties as well, move to direct ownership. Whereas under a power purchase agreement, you receive a fractional benefit. You receive the delta between the utility rate and your PPA rate to the investor. And then you do have an opportunity to buy it out and own all of the power generated. Because the city can access better interest rates on financing than we can see in the private market, where rates are typically around 6.5%, 7%. We're seeing municipal bond rates closer to 4%. That, combined with direct access of the tax credit, does mean that the greatest long-term value would come from direct ownership. So that's a mouthful. Happy to walk through the pro forma in more detail if that would be helpful. I think I covered the key community benefits, so I don't need to elaborate unless you have questions, but just reviewing our assumptions. And on a final note, Revision, we are proud to be a local employee-owned company and have been honored to work not just with the city, but with a lot of local nonprofits, and would be particularly excited to partner with the city and schools as part of our need and of course, our mission to encourage more young people to join the trades and be part of the growing clean energy economy. So with that, happy to take questions, and again, really appreciate the opportunity to present.
Questions here, committee? Yes, sir.
I've got a few. So some of these might be more for the city manager. I'll start with the, this one might not be. A lot of this, it looks like 20% of the savings is banked on the rec value. Is there a risk on that value with everything that's going on with tax incentives going away?
Yeah, thank you. So the RECs, or renewable energy credits, are a complement of sorts to the federal tax policy, where states in New England have set, as I'm sure you know, their renewable portfolio standard goals for transitioning to clean energy. New Hampshire has admittedly a very low RPS, specifically when it comes to solar, but we have the benefit of being part of the ISO New England grid with the other New England states. And so virtually all RECs in New Hampshire are sold into the Massachusetts market, which has very substantial clean energy goals under their renewable portfolio standard, or RPS, moving toward 100% clean energy. And we've seen the rest of the New England states also set ambitious RPS goals far ahead of New Hampshire's. For that reason, we have seen REC prices, particularly, and in my view, this is an unfortunate turn, but with the particular attacks on offshore wind, which is significantly reducing the pace and the scale at which our neighboring states with their ambitious clean energy goals are actually fulfilling those goals. That is contributing to the REC values remaining very high. We are modeling, and I'll just $34, thank you. We've seen them trading at between $38 and $40 consistently over the last few years, and recently obtained from one of the independent energy consultants that tracks REC markets closely and sells RECs and trades RECs for other customers of ours and others in the market. Their forecast is that RECs will remain in the $38 to $40 through mid-century. We haven't modeled that full horizon. Policies could change in that time period, but we are encouraged by the fact that Mass and our neighboring states have had their RPS goals at a fairly high level and rising over the last couple of decades. And I had the opportunity recently to speak with the Massachusetts governor about their policy, and we've seen a number of moves there. What we've seen is a doubling down of state commitments to clean energy in the face of a pullback from the federal government.
That's where I didn't know if the REC pricing had anything to do with the federal government policy, where it's similar to the tax credit, but it sounds like it's not.
It does not have anything to do with federal policy. Thank you.
Do you want me to keep going, or do you want to go back and forth?
Go right ahead.
All right. I'm curious how the policy with this, or the collaboration with the school would work. Because, yeah, if we're going to put up the investment, and obviously it's left pocket, right pocket for the taxpayer, so whatever, but
Yeah, so we would need to have a conversation with the school, and Dan, I haven't had that conversation yet. I don't know if you have had any conversations with them about this, but if we are able to do the project with the projections that we're looking at, it would make sense to them as a cost savings to jump on board our project.
What I can add, thank you, we have over the years had multiple conversations with the school district. They have periodically looked at on-site solar. Hasn't made sense for reasons mostly of roof condition and age. And they were helpful a couple months ago in providing their consumption data across the several school facilities to confirm that the demand or usage across city and school accounts meets the generation. What is, I think, important to note is that there would be zero financial cost or administrative burden on the schools to participating. We have not as yet made a formal request, and they haven't committed, to be sure. But under New Hampshire net metering rules, for projects like this that are feeding the grid directly and then assigning the generated power to other accounts within the utility service territory, the way in which those other accounts procure their electricity doesn't actually change at all. Historically, there was a requirement that those accounts revert from competitive supply to default utility supply, and that was a challenge because they forewent the opportunity to bid for lower price electricity from their direct suppliers. That was something we were fortunately able to correct in state law a few years ago now. And so the school district, as well as the city itself, would continue to shop on the open market for the best rate in terms of direct supply for its several accounts. There's no cost to participating, nor is there any state requirement about the level of compensation, if any, the city would provide to the school district.
And that's where I didn't know if it had to be a direct off-credit bill, and if ours went functionally negative, because I don't think it would go negative, but if it went down lower and we needed their balance to correct for that, if it would start shifting to their bill for the credit, that's where I was getting lost.
And that's a great question. I did note on-bill crediting. That's actually one of two pathways allowed under state net metering rules. It's the more administratively simple, but the amount of the credit going to each of the bills is determined by the host, in this case the city itself, the system owner. So an allocation could be agreed upon that made sense for the city and schools. The alternative way is to receive simply a monthly check from the utility. And then the annual accounting is verifying that the several accounts listed are still consuming electricity, still operating in Eversource territory, but the payments could go 100% to the city with a separate letter agreement with the school district, or they could go directly to whatever allocation the city determined as the system owner.
Awesome. Thank you. And the next two are more comments, so I don't want to. So generally, I'm curious, but I don't want you to answer how much the Sparrow cost us. And then it seems like generally we're printing money. If the rate of return is better than the bonded rate, then it seems like, we're going into deliberations in my head here, but that seems great. So, thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we're almost to September at this point, and so that December deadline for actually procuring some of it seems like it's looming pretty close. How are we feeling about actually getting that?
Yeah, so it definitely is there's not a lot of wiggle room in terms of the time frame, but we can make it. And the only reason we can make it is because if the council were to decide that you wanted to own the project, and at your next FOP you made that recommendation, it went to full council, we'd have to have a resolution to authorize the borrowing. And then Dan, the revision, would be able to purchase panels. We'd have an upfront cost after we've got the authorization to borrow. Dan's revision would purchase the panels. They would store the panels for us to meet that requirement. And we may or may not actually use those actual panels when it comes time to building the project. Is that accurate?
Just to elaborate a little bit, what the IRS requires under the so-called beginning of construction safe harbor rules is that in order to avert a stringent set of requirements that will take effect January 1st regarding supply chains for the equipment, the so-called FEOC, foreign entity of concern, restrictions that were a part of the HR 1 budget bill in July. In order to avoid those requirements, and we expect at minimum those will push the price up meaningfully, and there are questions about available supply chain at this point. So in order to avert those, the city would need to meet that beginning of construction safe harbor before the end of this year. And the two key requirements are a signed contract and a purchase order for minimum 5% of the system cost in terms of solar components. Panels most often are the item procured through the safe harbor process. We had the benefit, so to speak, of going through this with a number of municipal and other clients back in 2019 when the tax credit was on schedule to phase out and did phase out in part before being restored under the Inflation Reduction Act. So it's a very familiar process to Revision and the industry, but it is critical that the city would be able to contract and take ownership under the contract of that modicum of the system components. And I should note, as I've discussed with the city manager, we are not in a position, we being the industry, to issue purchase orders in December and take delivery within the required 105-day, 3.5-month time frame. The demand to safe harbor is such that our suppliers are telling us very loudly and clearly now that we need to be making our final orders in the month of September in order to take delivery for them to be able to actually complete the fabrication, the manufacturing, and deliver them by the end of Q1. So it is a tight timeline. We certainly appreciate the council's attention, and our recommendation would be if the FOP committee does recommend and the city council takes the recommendation and authorizes the city to proceed in the next couple meetings, that we would simultaneously commence contract review and be in a position to sign by the end of September.
So why are we looking to go on more time instead of just move forward?
Well, because I thought you would want more time, to be honest. Because it's a big decision, and there's a lot that goes into this, and understanding all the pieces of this financial puzzle. And we did take a look. We did have an independent review of Revision's proposal, and it's more conservative. It's much more conservative, which is what you would expect. It's based on both different rates, anticipating different electric rates in the future. We have modeled it with or without the 30% if we didn't meet the safe harbor provision. And so it's still a substantial savings to the city if we purchase it. It's not as much so if we do a power purchase agreement. So I'll just say quickly, the analysis that they prepared, and this is Beacon Integrated Solutions, if the city owned the solar arrays and we used the base case pricing, so the lower pricing, they're estimating a 30-year benefit of $13 million. In the base case pricing, without meeting the tax credit, they are estimating just over $8.5 million. In the high case, with the tax credit, they're estimating again over the $13 million. Now there are other assumptions in there. They add more for O&M. They use different escalators. It's a more conservative estimate, and so. I wasn't sure that you would be prepared this evening for a motion and to move forward with the resolution. But what you could do to kind of keep it going, if you are prepared, you could recommend that the city manager draft the resolution, have it ready for the next council meeting for first reading, and then it'll come back to you for your next FOP. That gives you additional time, but yet keeps the process still moving forward.
I'm very much aligned to that.
And can I also just add, we did take a look, the finance director took a look, we did just recently get rates from the New Hampshire Bond Bank. We looked at the cost to borrow for the $10.2 million over 20 years, and we have a rate of 4.3%. So it's a principal and interest payment in the first year of $773,000. Now that's definitely a much lower rate than if it was being done in the private market, and that's typically the case that we are able to access lower interest rates for borrowing.
And the $13 million is on bonded funds?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. 10.2 at
No, so
4.3.
your
Oh,
no, but
my
your
savings,
return
yes.
is off of
Yeah.
bonded funds.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
Yeah, looking at the revision owned, and I've got copies of this if you want it, the power purchase agreement, it's, the 30-year benefit is on the base case, so this would be lower rates, is just under $1 million, and then on the high, pricing, they have it at 800,000. So it's definitely more conservative, which I expect from an independent analysis like this. And that's why I started the conversation by saying we have an optimistic, a very conservative, and we will likely be somewhere in the middle. None of us are able to perfectly estimate what the rates will be in the future for electricity and how much savings we will have, nor can we guarantee the credits moving forward.
Hey, Mr. Chair, I'm also aligned with trying to move forward, just given the tight timeline of trying to get things ordered by September. Just one last question on it. So, if I'm not mistaken, all of the solar arrays that we currently have are PPA, and
Yes,
we don't
that's
own
correct.
any. Have we found any substantial benefit to doing PPA that we should really be considering here instead of
So
ownership?
the benefit of a power purchase agreement is that we don't assume any of the risk. So we're not maintaining, and I should say that this analysis includes in replacing the inverters midway through, it includes operation and maintenance of the project throughout the life of the project. But with a power purchase agreement, you're not assuming any of that. But you also aren't able to take advantage of the savings at the same level because the investor needs some savings or some profit in terms of his or her investment in the project, and then revision gets paid, and by the time you're done, the savings, it's still a savings, and we have found it to be a savings for all of our solar arrays so far, but it's not as great. And looking at ownership has only really made sense to me for a project of this size when we can take advantage of this credit, and knowing that this credit is going away, the importance of safe harboring it and in the next few months.
I agree too that we should be moving. I went and ordered windows for my house in June, and I'm told that I can expect them at the end of September. That's window, so we just have a really short time. And two other ones is the wind projects, and a lot of them are just coming to a complete halt, and it may be that way for the next 2 to 3 years. And AI is just sucking up electricity all the time. And I think we're being way too conservative on what we expect the cost of it. I was just reading Texas shut down a lot of their wind and all that. And now they're going, wait a minute, we could have a 15 to 20% deficit. And like they had before when they had that big freeze storm, when they started buying it on the open market, a lot of other places around the country really felt the, and I think that risk is out there again.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with you at all, but it's my job to tell you about these risks and give you conservative estimates, because it's better to be conservative and happy with our project in the end.
Yeah, I like that we have a conservative estimate because there is a lot of variation in the price per solar, which, 20-year spike and then it comes back down. It seems like I mean, my guess is as good as, anybody, or your guess is as good as anybody at what the power cost will be in 20 years. So, having a base case is helpful because it seems like the break-even point is somewhere around like 13 or 14 cents while we're paying the loan, and then it'll be cash after that. I'm just trying to figure it out obviously we're looking at this quickly. The point of the resolution going forward is we're not making a decision at that point, but it keeps the process moving. and then we can come back and still make a decision when we get more information and go through?
Yeah, that allows me to put the resolution on the next agenda at the same time this recommendation moves forward, so it gets first reading. It just expedites the process, but it doesn't make the decision.
Yeah, I would want to understand where the break-even point is on the value of the solar, both while we're paying the loan and when we're, obviously, once we're out of paying the loan, it's basically nothing, but, yeah.
So I would agree that, you know, this is a good solution. Were we to try to do it at the next meeting would probably not be the best way, because we're going to be busy enough just cleaning up a couple of items that have been
Yeah.
waiting for that meeting. And there's a public hearing also, I think, so. Yeah, this is a plan.
Yeah, so with the ownership, you can see on page 2, this is the more conservative estimate. In year 2, we become profitable. That's with the loan included.
That's pretty quick.
That's very quick, yeah.
And this is assuming current pricing for electricity, basically?
Yes, and some more conservative rates in terms of what we would get back
Yeah.
for the recs, yeah.
Because you should ask them if they'll sign up for the O&M that they have on the contract right now. Do a
Yes.
40-year O&M contract.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Who's got the motion?
I think it's on me. So clarification on what we need for motions tonight. Do we just need one for you to draft a resolution to go do the bonding? Do we also need a motion to actually go sign contracts yet? Or would that be for, right, because just, if we just do the bonding, that wouldn't be enough to actually like move forward with the project, right? So,
That is correct, yeah, but when we come back with the resolution, we would probably have the execution, negotiate, execute contract for the solar project at the airport, yeah.
okay.
No, I said, good question to him.
So, move to recommend that the city manager draft a resolution for bonding for the airport solar project.
Second.
Okay, been moved and seconded. Any further discussion, committee? Seeing none, all in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
With that, we are adjourned.
Oh, that was pretty easy.